Good evening, my name is Katarzyna Nowicka and welcome to Poland Daily News. According to experts, Putin's propaganda war based on historical lies is a planned operation, calculated not only for political destabilization in Poland, but also for internal use. By attacking Poland at all costs, Putin is trying to maintain among Russians a sense of superpower of the state, whose founding myth is victory in the Great Patriotic War.
The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, didn't stop at his last scandalous statements about Poland, referring to the September resolution of the European Parliament, indicating that the reason of the outbreak of the Second World War was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. At that time, Putin stated that Poland collaborated with Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union was not responsible for the outbreak of the war.
This is what the secret protocols say about the partition of Poland, but Poland itself took part in the partition of Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet army, in accordance with the secret protocols, entered Poland. I would like to stress the fact that they entered after the Polish government lost control over its army and they didn't know what was happening on the Polish territory. The government was located on the Polish-Romanian border. There was no one to talk to.
The Institute of National Remembrance and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wrote a statement as a response to Putin's words. After a few days during his speech, Putin mentioned the Polish diplomat and the ambassador of the Second Polish Republic in Berlin, Józef Lipski, in an offensive manner.
A good-for-nothing anti-Semitic pig. I can't call him differently. He fully sympathized with Hitler and his anti-Semitic attitude. What is more, he promised to build him a memorial for his iniquity against the Jewish people.
On Friday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs called the Russian ambassador to Poland, Sergei Andreyev. Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, reacted to Putin's historical lies. He said that there is no permission to swap victims and executioners.
Putin said many lies about Poland many times. He always did that knowingly. It often happens in a situation when the Moscow authority feels an international pressure connected to their current actions. Russia failed a few times in the last few weeks. Their attempt to subjugate Belarusians failed. The European Union extended sanctions for the annexation of Crimea once again. The talks of the Normandy format not only didn't stop the sanctions, but engaged the Americans. And this makes Nord Stream 2 hard to accomplish. Additionally, the Russian athletes have been suspended for doping. I think that Putin, by saying what he said, is trying to hide all those problems. He knows that his allegations have nothing to do with reality and that there are no memorials of Hitler or Stalin in Poland. Memorials like that were in Poland when the aggressors were building them: Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union.
The US ambassador to Poland, Georgette Mosbacher, commented on the matter today. Dear President Putin, Hitler and Stalin colluded to start World War II. That is a fact. Poland was a victim of this horrible conflict. Publicists and experts say that Putin started a brutal and cynical game against Poland.
It seems that Putin wants to destabilize the situation in our country. He doesn't like the path that Poland follows, he doesn't like our political direction and our rising economic rates.
Everything indicates that the last statement of Putin is not the end of his attacks towards our country. The World Holocaust Forum, during which Putin will be the main speaker, is going to take place on January 23rd in Jerusalem.
Today, the journalist of the Szczecin radio, Tomasz Duklanowski, revealed information about additional people who allegedly were to bribe Professor Tomasz Grodzki in the past in exchange for speeding up a surgery at the time when he was the head of a hospital department in Szczecin. After becoming the Speaker of the Senate, the Civic Platform politician Tomasz Grodzki announced that he was going to sue anyone who would slander his name. As Mr. Duklanowski claims, he still hasn't received a letter from the Speaker of the Senate. Now over to world news. There has been a shootout in a Protestant church in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas. 2 participants in the service were killed and several others were injured. Armed parishioners shot and killed the attacker. The attack took place during a Sunday service in a church in White Settlement, Texas. It can be seen on the security footage that at one point the attacker opened fire to the attendees of the Mass, to which church security responded quickly. One of them shot the aggressor. According to local police, the perpetrator is dead.
At approximately 11:50 a.m., a gunman entered the West Freeway Church of Christ, White Settlement, Texas, during the church service. The preliminary reports indicated that the man entered the church and fired a weapon. A couple of members of the church returned fire, striking the suspect who died at the scene. Tragically, the person shot by the suspect died at a local hospital.
2 people were killed and 1 is in critical condition in the hospital. If not for the quick response of the church security guards, there could have been more victims.
This country has seen so many of these that we've actually gotten used to it to this point. And it's tragic, and it's a terrible situation, especially during the holiday season. I would like to point out that we have a couple of heroic parishioners who stopped short of just anything that you could even imagine.
For now, the attacker's identity has not yet been revealed, and his motivations are not known. The investigation is being conducted by the FBI.
A very tragic day when anybody in our community suffers, whether it's a community that's next to Fort Worth or in Fort Worth itself. Our hearts and prayers go out to all the families that were affected by this incident.
Today, evil walked boldly among us. But let me remind you, good people raised up and stopped it before it got worse.
In September this year, a law came into force which states that you can bring weapons to temples in Texas. A Croatian court ruled today that the head of Hungarian energy group MOL and Croatia's former prime minister were guilty in a corruption case. This event opens a new chapter in a legal saga that has dragged on for almost a decade.
MOL's chief executive and chairman, Zsolt Hernadi, was found guilty of bribing former Croatian Prime Minister Ivo Sanader in 2008 to allow MOL to become the key decision-maker in Croatian energy firm INA. MOL is INA's biggest shareholder, owning close to 50%, while Croatian state owns 45%.
Presuda ime Republike Hrvatske. Prvo optuženi Ivo Sanader.
First defendant, Ivo Sanader, based on Article 341, Paragraph 1 of the Criminal Code, is hereby sentenced to 6 years in prison. The second defendant, Zsolt Tamas Hernadi, based on Article 348, Paragraph 1 of the Criminal Code, is hereby sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Hernadi and Sanader were handed prison sentences of 2 and 6 years respectively. The ruling is not final and can be appealed. The defense lawyers of both men said they were disappointed with the court's verdicts and conduct of the trial.
I believe the Supreme Court will squash this verdict on the grounds that during the trial, Mr. Sanader's rights were violated. I have never seen trial hearings conducted this way before. For example, one hearing was held without the presence of one of the judges, without the defense agreeing to it taking place.
Hernadi and Sanader, who was Prime Minister from 2003 until 2009, have denied any wrongdoing in the case that was originally launched by Croatia's anti-corruption agency. Sanader was initially sentenced to 8.5 years in prison in 2014 for taking a bribe from MOL, but Croatia's constitutional court in 2015 ordered a retrial, citing procedural errors. Hungary has refused to heed an international Interpol arrest warrant for Hernadi.
That's all for tonight. Now on to Poland Daily Business with Aleksander Wierzejski and his guest. Good night.
Hello and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. Tonight the forecast will bring partly cloudy skies throughout the country. We can expect temperatures of 0 degrees on the seacoast to -5 degrees in Wrocław. Tomorrow we can expect a bright and fair day in Poland. The warmest spots on the map will be Poznań and Gdańsk at 6 degrees, while the coldest will be Olsztyn at 1 degree above zero.
Poland Daily Business Edition, and tonight we will obviously talk about green technologies, Green New Deal that European Union is going to impose on its member countries. The member countries should curb the CO2 emission in energetics, in industry, and obviously in agriculture. Our guest tonight is Jakub Wiech of Energetyka24.pl portal. So welcome to the show.
Hello.
And please tell us who will benefit from this European Union rules regarding the curbing the emission?
Well, in the long term, everybody should benefit from our climate neutrality because it is a policy that's being introduced to stop climate change. However, in the shorter terms, we are talking about some more or less direct economic benefits stemming from, for example, technological change in the sphere of energy. And while looking on this, we have to acknowledge that some countries in Europe are more developed in the field of transforming their energy system than others. And the most important and the most advanced one is obviously the German state. And I think that while talking about beneficiaries of Green New Deal, we should point at Berlin and say that, well, Germans are going to be the beneficiaries of it. They have invested a lot of money in their Energiewende. They are trying to impose it, the model that are...
But this is not Germany who is mainly pushing for this legislation. We see that Germany, during their lignite lignite plants, want to, at least this are the information that came from the press, that they want to stop it, slow it down, reduce to some sensible amount.
I think that Germany will be able to find some additional sources of financing their coal exit thanks to Green New Deal, because we are talking about some amount of euros that will be split by the countries that are quitting coal, and Germany is one of them. Germany is the biggest lignite consumer in the world, and it needs lots of euros to handle with that process, and some federal some union states in Germany say that they will need more money than the federal government told them to give. So I think that it may help to Germany to continue their energy transition and to obtain some new financial sources to just help it going through, because Energiewende is actually in some kind of point of no return, and as well in some troubles, mainly because of lack of money to, for example, windmill
so on one
farms.
side we have very advanced technology country like Germany, Norway, Sweden, the country that use hydropower, that has lots of wind and lots of sunshine. And on the other side of this equation, but also on the beneficiary, are those countries that will receive the investment, because Europe needs steel, Europe needs cement or concrete, Europe needs car production or any or other sources of food and industrial might that will not be produced locally due to the lack of technology and the CO2 pollution.
Yep, that's correct. And one of the biggest accusations coming from the critics of the EU climate policy is that the way that Brussels handles with it just pushes the emissions outside the EU.
Together with jobs.
Together with jobs, together with incomes, and so on. And we see it very visible, very clearly that, for example, the steel industry moves to Ukraine and opens their factories there. But that's why EU leaders came up with the idea of so-called coal tax that should be implemented on goods that are being imported to the EU from countries that do not handle properly with their climate policies. And if that mechanism will be implemented correctly, if that mechanism will work, we'll be able to stop the industry here in the EU. But as far as now, we cannot say that we know anything more specific than the fact that there has been some talks.
But generally we can say that products and services will be more expensive in Europe than elsewhere in the world due to this new idea of curbing CO2 emission?
Well, it depends actually. It depends on the costs of energy in the EU. It depends on the cost of energy outside the world. It depends, for example, on what will US do with their climate policy.
What are your ideas about that?
Well, I think that next year presidential elections in the US will bring another victory of Donald Trump. So the current line of Washington in the sphere of climate policy will be held, and but maybe it will be due to some trade deals with China. It will be more possible for the EU to, for example, use the force of United States to help Brussels negotiate with Beijing and to maybe grant some, for example, more ambitious reduction goals when it comes to emissions. And of course, we look very closely what will happen in the next COP26 in Glasgow, because the last one, COP25 in Madrid, did not bring anything specific in that matter.
Yeah, well, this is obviously a hope that the countries that are developing, that had real problem like India, China, Brazil, South America, will follow the good example that sets the Europe. We have this saying in Poland, dobrymi chęciami jest piekło wybrukowane. The good hopes are deep in the hell.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Jakub Wiech, Energetyka24.pl, Chief Editor. Sir, thank you very much for this conversation. And that was it for Poland Daily Business tonight.
Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily Business Weather. The forecast tomorrow will bring some very fair weather to Poland. We can expect partly cloudy skies throughout the country and temperatures of 1 to 6 degrees. In Europe, we will see showers in Lisbon and Paris, clear skies in Prague and Minsk, cloudy skies are expected in Moscow and Helsinki, and partly cloudy skies will be seen throughout the rest of the continent. The temperatures will vary between 2 and 14 degrees. And that is all for now. I thank you for joining us, and I invite you to stay with us for further Poland Daily programs.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and this is Poland Daily Culture. In this series of programs, I'll be talking to young Polish publicist and freshly baked author Ania Stępiak. Aniu, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Her first book, It's a Displeasure, just appeared in the bookstores. So let's find out what is her story. Aniu, the relations between people are difficult. I would say maybe they were always difficult because we humans are really bloody, difficult and sometimes awful creatures who are very hard to maintain and very hard to deal with. But your book is also about relations of people, and none of them are easy. Neither like relations between lovers or in a marriage. Every single of your character needs to challenge something. And do you think that they are getting more difficult, especially those intimate things and like family? Because we often have to accept the fact we have these examples of patchwork families. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a reality, it becomes something standard, that people get divorced and that they start new lives.
I have an observation that if you ever go to, as a guest, for example, I don't know about your family, but if you go to a family gathering where there are many generations and many siblings from every parent, etc., it's such a great feeling to be in a big family, and this world is slowly, I would say, vanishing, right? Because now we have something which is called nuclear families, and this is just, you know, mom, dad, and a child usually. I mean, I don't want to say that a parent, two parents and a child is something, you know, wrong, but such a family is not strong enough to be against different social challenges that are right now. This is not in the book, but I think if you read it, you can come to such a conclusion as well. And by the way, recently I noticed that in my book, none of the characters uses smartphone. I find it a very, I would say, good standard of this, that I haven't written anything about it. So you can just read about how people interact without this digital gadgets.
All of your characters in the book, they start to bear the responsibilities. So they actually try to bear their responsibilities. And okay, we have the main character who I would say a little bit gave up at the beginning of his family, and then he's trying to have it back. But a better example is his friend Julius, who tried to glue it somewhere. He made a mistake, he cheated on his wife, but he's trying to fight for both of his children and for his wife. So even though it's hard, they do fight for it. They do try to do their best. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's the message that's enough? Just try to be the best.
Yes, and thanks for noticing that. I can just reply by saying, have you heard about how many people, you know, after 5 or 10 years of marriage, I would say usually men, but sometimes women as well, just say, okay, I'm fed up with you, and I just go away, and like that, and without any working on that, spending time, putting effort. I think it's something, well, I just don't want to use very common words like horrible, but it's something that we should think about. So yes, these two characters struggle, and in the case of Julius, his wife, we can just guess because we don't know, but she accepted it, probably forgave him, and they're trying to do their best for the sake of their children. And by the way, I can just mention that I hope it's noticeable as well that there are also many strong female characters in this book, like, for example, wife of Julius.
And of course, Aneta, I would say that the women are the strongest in this book. Mm-hmm. And you very strongly underline the fact that they are the toughest, and that they try to... Even there are passages about the fact that women nowadays are tougher than guys.
Yes, but I don't want to be unfair and just towards men and just say, oh, you are weak, so we should, I don't know, despise you or something. This is stupid thinking. I can just say, okay, certain social changes made women stronger than men, and especially I think in our society in Poland, because of different reasons, you know, all the wars, all the very difficult times. But on the other hand, I'm sorry to say, but some women raise their sons in a way that make them weak.
They are Peter Pans.
They are Peter Pans, so women are to blame as well.
I would like to just underline the fact that you have this very funny passage in your book when you say that men are right now Peter Pans because they don't have that element of challenge. Previously, this huge challenge which most of them needed to stand up to was war. And of course, we don't say that wars are good, but they needed to be soldiers. They needed to be also physically fit, but mentally fit. They needed to have enough courage to fight, also to stand up for their lives and the lives of their families. And right now we don't have this element, so they don't have this challenge. I read the element that I mean, your opinion from the book, that makes them weaker. Do you think that we can change this fact?
Again, I want to escape from this passage of being against men. I'm not against men, and I really hate the so-called feminists that all the time speak about how men are bad, and just I can't listen to it. I just want to say, you mentioned challenges. I would say I would shed some more light on that in a broader perspective. So now, just imagine nowadays, in 2019, in a society where we have everything, whatever you like, you can have, you can buy, and you live in such comfortable conditions. Do you think if anything happens, then now 10 million people can just stand up, be together and be united against something and do something positive? I really doubt it.
Well, I hope it does. I hope it is possible, at least. I kind of believe in humankind, that they are able to do incredible things. But to summarize our conversations, it's sometimes good to find yourself in a discomfort zone, also to challenge yourselves. And the book, Bardzo mi niemiło, it's a displeasure, it's about this topic. And thank you for watching Poland Daily Culture.
Welcome back to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson, and my guest in the studio today, Matthew Termond. And we're talking about Polish-Jewish relations with particular reference to the life of Matthew's father, the well-known novelist Leopold Termond. Matthew, we've spoken earlier about your father in this post-war period, and the period of Stalin and the 50s, struggling as a writer against censorship and general sort of oppression by the authorities.
Communist overlords.
The communist overlords, yes. What happened in the later 50s, early 60s to your father? How did his career or his writing develop?
So after he wrote the diary, and he got this commission, and the diary obviously wasn't published until much later, but he got this commission to write Zły, Evil, his most famous novel about the dystopic period of the 50s in Warsaw, post-war, ruins, hooliganism. He became sort of a celebrity. He was famous for this sort of social dissidentism where it wasn't outright political, but it was. Very brightly colored socks, sunglasses at night, very dapper, very, promoting jazz, all these things that said, you will not obliterate me, you will not force me into this drab aesthetic of grays and earth tones. He found a tailor who was a pre-war talent who he would find used clothes and then tailor them perfectly to his style. And so he was known as this larger-than-life figure. And so he wrote some other books, and his other writing got more attention. And by the 60s, when there was this thaw where they allowed exit visas, he'd been invited by the State Department to do some lectures, like at Canisius College, a Polish, heavily Polish-centered university in Buffalo, New York, Catholic University in America. And so he went on a lecture tour. And the story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, was that to get the exit visa, to respond to the invitation and accept it, he needed approval from many in the communist structure. And his story was, and we don't know if it's true or not, but it's believable, was that Karol Wojtyła, who was Archbishop of Krakow, weighed in and pulled strings to help him get that exit papers. Right. They were friendly because my father was very involved in the Krakow intelligentsia. He'd written for the Catholic press, which was the last bastion of a freedom-oriented press, and as much as you could have that behind the Iron Curtain, and especially in Poland. And so I knew Karol Wojtyła very well. They played football together on the weekends. They were pretty decent friends. And so I don't know if it's true that the later Pope helped him exit Poland, but this was the story he ran with. And my father was a writer and a great storyteller, so you don't know. But he also said that when he exited Poland, it was like Christopher Columbus on a ship from Genoa. So I didn't know that if that was true or not, or if he had just, landed in JFK and claimed asylum, via plane. But apparently, according to his biographer, Marcel Wozniak, who's written the preeminent biography of him, that is the case, that he left Poland in late '65, and he went to Israel and spent several months with his mother.
Okay.
And then from there, he went to Italy and sailed via Genoa, like Christopher Columbus. Marcel found the ship Manifest, and then came to America and went on this lecture tour, and claimed asylum, and he stayed.
And when he arrived in America, was it his intention always to stay in America? Did he feel that he...
I don't know. I don't know. Certainly he was fascinated with America, and he would always joke early on in his years there that he came to America to save America from itself. He was an erudite guy who knew a lot about America and American literature. He'd read de Tocqueville, and he wrote a book. His first book in English language was Notebooks of a Dilettante, which was his own de Tocqueville-style travel log through America at the start of the counterculture revolution, mocking the left for their ridiculous fashions, and fashions, sort of intellectual fashions, not just stylistic attire. And the move the left made toward embracing socialism and then outright communism. The Harvard professors like John Kenneth Galbraith, who were still into the '60s saying that the Soviet Union was the great progressive, successful experiment in human organization and governance. And my father got to New York and he said, not so fast. I just got from there. It's pretty bad. And at first they feted him and he became this intellectual celebrity. He was writing articles for The New Yorker, which was the highest brow place you could publish in all of America. And then by '68, '69, with the counterculture revolution having so poisoned the institutions, the Long March, the Frankfurt School, they purged him out and they said, you don't know what you're talking about, communism. We know, we're the intellectuals of the American left. And so that's when he really had a hard shift to the political conservative right, intellectually and politically, philosophically, and in his writing.
I mean, it is when we look back now, quite incredible to be, that so many otherwise intelligent people were prepared to...
I would argue they're not that intelligent.
Well, exactly, but let's for the sake of the argument...
Educated people.
Which
also in these systems is brainwashed people, so they're sheep.
We're prepared to accept that the Soviet Union was this fantastic place.
Yeah,
if only we had more communism, the world would be a happier place.
My father used to have a joke. The joke would go such as, was Marx a scientist or a philosopher? And the answer is a philosopher, because if he were a scientist, he would have tested this idea out on lab rats first. And I think that is a very excellent parable of communism. It's a philosophy that has been proven to be, through empiricism, wrong, failed, miserable, oppressive, and as evil as you can get.
I mean, well, it certainly is, and of course your father and
testimony to it, both in Poland and then in America, when the left really tried to undermine him, and he had to move hard to the right.
Evidence of everything you just said. I mean, it's extraordinary. And today, we'll maybe get on a bit later, but today again we're going through the same debate. The left is sort of...
Oh yeah, they're out of their minds.
The people are...
It's about power. It's not about any sort of governing principles that are holistic. You look at the French Revolution and the Jacobins. This is the outgrowth of modern-day leftism. It's collectivism and it's conformity. And anyone who doesn't conform and move into the commune, the collective, willingly, well, they'll lose their heads.
Exactly. That's another good point.
Edmund Burke wrote about it. He predicted the reign of terror, 18 months before it commenced, absolutely perfectly, seeing the Paris Commune and the way the Jacobins moved the French Revolution forward. He predicted it in his analysis of the French Revolution, which is the most important text, I think, and up there with the Bible.
That's a great.
And my father called himself an Edmund Burkean classical liberal. For these reasons.
We actually, even today, I think we need far more of them. That's quite a positive.
Great. I'm very deeply involved in European politics, and I work with a lot of the sovereignty movements across the continent. I'm certainly involved in Polish politics, and it's very frustrating to see that you have leftists and rightists, and they're all socialists. So they're all collectivists on some level, and that's just not healthy in the long term for a prosperous and free society.
Well, indeed, and we'll maybe look at that a bit later. But thank you for this segment, Matthew.
My pleasure.
Been very fascinating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Poland Daily Travel. I hear those sleigh bells ring-a-lin, ding, ding, ding-a-lin, too. It's Christmas time, and the holiday season is especially special in Poland. As this series of programs will show you, Poland celebrates Christmas like no other. The capital city is covered in lights, and the Old Town is home to special Christmas market and ice skating. That's right, no climate change will stop Warszawians from taking to the ice. So we'll take a trip through the Christmas market and look at some of the items for sale and talk to some of the people who are selling them. We'll see the great Christmas tree and the castle bathed in lights. And we'll talk to a couple of longtime Warsaw residents from abroad, Jonathan Roy and Philip Goss, about what Christmas means to them. And especially, of course, Christmas in Poland. I'm Will Richardson, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and an extremely Happy New Year. From Poland Daily Travel and everyone at Poland Daily. So that's ho, ho, ho from me, and see you on the other side of the year.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another sterling edition of Poland Daily Travel, the best travel show about Poland that you're ever likely to see. The best show on God's green earth. And here we are in the Old Town Square in Warsaw. And you can see Christmas is truly upon us. This is a really great place to be at this time of day in the late afternoon. At this time of year, you can see people are skating over here. All the food shops and drink shops are open, and the souvenir shops. And there are actually quite a lot of local people, Warszawians, as well as tourists wandering about. It was raining a bit earlier, and now that's stopped. And even I noted that the sky was clearing up. And looks like we're going to have some very good days ahead. I just love coming here. It's magical. It's like Disneyland, but the real thing. We're going to look a lot at the Christmas lights, and we're going to walk around. I'd like to thank my guests for this series of segments about Christmas, which were Phil Goss and Jonathan Roy of Coco and Roy Restaurant. And, well, let's go for a walk and look at the lights. I'll be right back. So at Christmas time, we stop to think about all the things that mean so much to us. We think about the people we love, the people we miss, people that we've known during our lives. It's a time of year for reflection and to think positively about the year to come. And this is a good place to do it. I don't know about you, but I like the Christmas lights, I like the Christmas atmosphere. It's a great time for kids as well, and it's a great time to get together with your friends. And as I walk through this place, I remember there's a lot to be thankful for, and there's a lot to remember, and there's a lot to look forward to in the coming year.